It doesn't matter how well it's gone or anything like that. There's always a wall you'll hit that you have to figure it out.
I mean, I think the rule should be, if it's brilliant by mistake, take credit.
I wanted to talk about writing because obviously you write and you direct, and how do you think about them intertwined? Are they separate parts of your brain? Or are they similar parts of your brain? How do they work together?
Well, look, I think it's just a healthy part of the creative process. You know, going on the set with all eyes upon you, like, what are we going to do, boss? You know, if you've gone through the story in your mind and you know the characters and you know what you're there to say, you really can't make a mistake. You know, that's what I love about the writing process feeding into directing. I mean, I love writing for other directors as well and seeing their interpretation, but that's a completely different exercise.
I do separate the process. I write the script, and it's not until the script feels worthy of making a film, I think, okay, now I'm ready to do this. But I find too that writing time is slower time than directing time. Directing time is compressed, and it's it's limited. It's a timed art form. So I think for me, it's also relying on the script because because almost even if I can't remember necessarily all the reasons I did something, I do know that the past version of myself thought it through.
You're talking about trusting the writer you in the moment when stuff is coming at you at 120 miles an hour.
That's right.
Yeah, I always feel like I was smarter then, you know?
Yes.
And I'm just clinging to that written page, you know, like a life preserver in the moment on the set.
It's like, at the very least, I feel like if we do what's on the page in a coherent fashion, at least I know it's functional. I know people who just throw it all out and figure it out on the day, and I've never been able to do that.
Well, look, we're both writers and we write for our own directing process. So I think there's an equipoise between being open and not being precious on the day, and hearing the actors and letting them completely off the leash. If they're good actors and they've come prepared, and you know, I'm gonna select for people that are good and prepare. They know the lines, you know. So now it's like, what else could we do? You know, I also don't think I'm that even though I was smarter then, I don't necessarily think I was smarter than an actor who's feeling it in the moment and what they might blurt out, feeling it fully.
Right. I also think of you as working with such smart actors. Sigourney Weaver is so smart. And I feel like when you work with people like that, you feel like, well, you might have some key that I don't have. So I want your brain on this moment, and to be able to illuminate something that I was hazy on, and then you'll make it very specific.
It's a tricky thing. I mean, as a writer, you have to serially inhabit each character. But when you're on the set and you're really conducting an orchestra, and that actor's in charge of, you know, the string section, and that's all they think about. That's all they think about is their character, their character's worldview. So I'm curious. I want to talk about all your films, not just the obvious elephant in the room, big pink elephant. But when you select your actors, when you make that final decision, how much of it is about the creativity and the thought process in the character that they bring to it are you looking for?
It's exactly what you said. When I give them the character, then they instantly know more about it than I do. Yeah. And I want them to feel almost the sense of they have a secret from me. Even though we're doing my script and my words, I even like to encourage things like I'm part of costume fittings and all of that, but I also want them to actually do it separate. Then I get the feeling of a little bit of voyeurism, which I like that they have a secret interior world, and now I'm looking at it. So really it's that moment of handing it over, and there's just some actors that you feel, when you talk to them about it, or they audition, or they walk into a room, that it's already theirs. They already have it, and they have it inside of them, and they already know a little more than you do. And it's that feeling.
What you're describing is very much the way I think of it. I love your metaphor of handing ownership. At the moment that you set an actor for part, you've just handed ownership of that character to somebody else. At that point, you're just a coach. You may be an Olympic coach, but you're just a coach. They have to live it, do it, achieve it. But there's an interesting moment where the ownership in a way gets taken back, which is in the cutting room, which I always think of as the last draft of the script. And then you see sometimes, well, not that it's a mess necessarily, but that it's not feeling like it's what you set out to say. Have you had that feeling on your films?
Yes, of course. I mean, is the editing room your favorite place to be?
It's the one part of the process that I find is anti-entropic. Every other part of the process is always a little bit, something's being taken away from the crystalline perfect version of the movie that everybody thinks exists in your mind. And I always feel like, okay, I'm compromising, I'm letting something go. And when I say cut for the last time on a specific scene and we move on to a new scene, I always feel, what did I miss? You know,
Yes.
Whereas in editing, you're building, you're improving, it's getting better and better as you go along. So to me, you go in this kind of slide of compromise, and then you go into the cutting room and you start creating something that gets better every day, and that's what I like about it.
I mean, I have the same feeling when I'm writing as when I'm editing. It's when I'm writing, every day you're writing, you're confronted with something that is not yet good. You haven't made it good yet, because when it's good, then it's done, and now you're ready to make the movie. And the same thing happens with editing. It's like I always say with my editor, who I've worked with on every movie, Nick Hui, I say, we just get it to a place where I don't want to peel my skin off when I watch a scene.
Cringe at your own stuff, like what, Yeah. I really listen to other people in the room. I used to have this misapprehension that directing was kind of a solo art form. It's the myth of the auteur. And I find as I go along that it's really important to vet ideas with everybody else. You still have to make the final decisions, but like I'll literally pull the room when we're in like an effects review or a sequence review. Guys, is this working? Or what are you feeling here? That sort of thing. I'm a lot more collaborative than I did when I started out, because when I started out, I had these kind of myths in mind of what my role was.
Some directors are very comfortable coming into an edit and looking at an assembly and just what kind of it roughed together.
Yeah.
And I find this is something I got from Noah Baumbach, who I wrote Barbie with and who's also my life partner.
Yeah.
He said, I don't know how to fix it if I don't know how it was built. And I think that's why I start editing with I'm like, all right, what's the first shot? Now what are we cutting? What's the next shot? Like I just go through methodically, because then I know what I've done wrong. But sometimes if you're looking at just a big assembly, you can't even figure out what the problem is. Or that's
I see what you're saying.
I want to make my own mistakes, I suppose.
Do you find it's hard to watch your film from end to end a number of times? I personally try to limit that. I'm curious about your perspective on that.
Well, there always comes a point where the film, it starts becoming what it wants to be on some deep level. Mm-hmm. And then there's still problems with it here or there, but I find that if I can get it to that point, I stop being able to see it or feel it, which is actually where I find watching it with an audience at some point becomes useful for me, because then I can sort of vicariously experience it again. And then I can feel an audience boredom. I can feel when they're falling out, when they're coming in. And that becomes really helpful at the end, because I always feel like when I get to an end of a movie, I have no feelings left. I have no idea.
And then it's just, hey, guys, throw it over the fence, see what the audience thinks. I've done my best. I've started to realize that it's really a little filter that drops into your brain that says, I now know nothing about this movie, and what's going to happen next, and what kind of journey is it taking me on. And man, when I watch in that mode with other people, I start to see all kinds of things. Shit, I didn't set that up very well. Oh, they're lost here. Ah, fuck. You know?
No, it is that filter, and it really can be one or two people.
We have to, as directors, we have to do that for some hypothetical millions of people. And it can kind of drive you nuts.
And you always reach a point in a movie where you think, not 100% of all people will like 100% of all of this.
Yeah.
But so you can't do that, but you do have to find that the sort of the place that is so specific in you that somehow corresponds with the place that's so specific in other, you know, it's like a dance.
Right. Yeah. So it's the ultimately you circle back to the authenticity of your own voice and your own unique perspective as an artist. What I like to do is I like to figure out how many tickets I need to sell for the movie to break even, and what is that as a percentage of the total population of the planet. And it usually works out to be like 2%. So it's like, if I can't make 2% of the human race happy with this movie, then I should get the hook. You know?
Oh, that's an amazing way to think about it. I never quite thought of it that way, because I think particularly when you're doing something that's, you know, risky and large, you want to have some sense of like, who's this going to reach? How is it going to go? Like, is this, you know, you don't want to make something that's just utterly for no one. You know?
Well, exactly. Well, I think it starts with partner writing, because you work with Noah. And so you're bouncing on, so at least two people agree, you know. So after that, you know, it's just an extension. But you said risky. Do people see Barbie for how risky it was? Because that's an incredibly risky movie.
No, it was a risky movie, and I think with so many of your movies that you know, are so beloved and so successful that when you look at it in retrospect, everybody thinks, well, of course that was going to work. But at the time, no one knew it was going to work at all.
Exactly.
And the fact that time only moves in one direction, things seem inevitable that were anything but inevitable.
Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
I want to hear about the steps that led up to you choosing to commit a couple of years or whatever it was of your life to Barbie. Seriously, and I don't mean that to sound light, because clearly the film, you must have seen some out of focus version of that film in your mind at some point and said, I can do this. And at some point you also say, I'm the right one to do this. Right? Whether you've thought of it in those terms or not, you must have said, I, Greta Gerwig, am the right person to go make the movie about Barbie, the great, you know, kind of female post-feminist icon, capitalist symbol, whatever it was. How did you get to that? What's the history of it?
I tend to back into things in a way. I think every single thing I've made, I've started by saying, well, I'll just write it. I almost don't get to the directing part of it, but it's probably self-protection. But even going back to Lady Bird, I thought, well, I'll write this and then I'll give it to someone else to direct. I couldn't quite conceive of doing the whole thing. And with Barbie, I mean, I loved Margot Robbie as an actor, and she's done great work as a producer, and she came to me and said, I have this IP, you can do whatever you want with it. And I said, I'd like to write it with Noah, because we hadn't written together for a while. We wrote movies, Frances Ha and Mistress America together, and those were great fun to write. We don't do outlines or treatments, we just write a movie.
I was going to ask you about that process too. I mean, you know, you just plunge in, right? Like it's scene writing, right?
We just start like with ideas and scenes, and I do alone and we do together, just overwrite. You write way too much and then you start, it's almost like the story kind of emerges from that. So we said, you know, leave us alone and then we'll give you a script. And then it wasn't until we had the script, I thought that they'd never make it. So that felt like a degree of self-protection as well, because I said, well, I'd like to direct this movie.
It won't get made, so I don't have to worry about it. Right, I see what you're saying. It's like, okay, if they're dumb enough to hire me, then we'll go to the next step, and you know.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not like you saw yourself on the set, and then, okay, we got to quick write something so that I could be standing there.
It's almost like, I don't know, playing a game of chicken with a movie making process, because it was stepping it out, and then it's like, we have this script that I love, but they'll never make it, and then, you know, initially the budget wasn't enough, and I said, well, listen, it's Barbie. You gotta make it. I think it needs a big canvas, and we got to do it this way. And then I thought, well, they'll never do that. And then it slowly started coming together. And then there was a point where I thought, I've only made, this is number 3. And I feel like each movie I'm still learning, I'm still changing, I'm still developing, I'm figuring out how to do things differently than I've done before. I think I said on the phone to someone, I'm gonna have to be a better director than I've been in order to do this.
I think you're good, but I think it's also healthy to feel that sense of hunger for improving your craft indefinitely. There was that old Arnold movie that was called Stay Hungry. You know, to me, that's a motif. I always want to know who's doing what's the new tech, what are the new ideas. I always feel like there are places that I haven't gone to in storytelling.
Yes.
That are maybe, you know, personal or sensitive or maybe third rail type subjects that you know, I want to, you know, lend my voice to.
Right.
I see such a through line in your 3 films. There was one of the prepared suggested questions today that talked about strong women, and I get the strong women thing all the time, but
I'm
it's
sure.
really not, in your film, they're not overtly, or at least initially, strong people, apparently. Right. They find an inner strength as they go along. They're wanting to be heard and they're not heard. This is true across all 3 films. And they ultimately settle into their authentic life by the end. And that's a strength that I think certainly women, everybody should be able to relate to that, but certainly I think women relate to that.
Like a hero's journey, and you know, getting something that's important in this journey. But the truth is, it's about how the hero is changed, not about getting the thing.
Exactly.
That what you get is the change. And I think I'm always looking for what those moments of transformation are in different guises. And you know, I like women, I'm interested in women, but I'm just interested in the process of change that occurs when you undertake what seems to be an impossible endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's, you know, publishing a book or going to college, or you're a doll who becomes human.
Lady Bird didn't believe that it was very likely that she was going to get into one of the Eastern universities that she had fantasized about, but she did it anyway. Kind of how we live our lives, you know. This probably won't work out, but I just feel compelled to do it.
Exactly. And that, honestly, when I look at your filmography and look at all of the things you've done, I feel like so many of your films, I mean, have pushed technology forward, but also they are ideas that require more of movies than have yet been available. And it's almost a sort of amazing challenge, you know, Abyss and you know, Terminator 2, and now with Avatars, that you just keep, it's like, do you have a sense while you're writing, like, there's no way to do this yet, but I'm going to have to invent it?
I think so. I mean, I always feel like I've had imagery in my mind since I was a kid that there was no way to do. And it's only in really the last decade that we're at a point where pretty much anything I can imagine is now doable. If you throw enough talent, artistic talent, and money at the problem, it's all doable. But there was certainly a period earlier on for me around Terminator and Aliens and so on, where we had to be pretty ingenious to come up with new ways of doing things, to bring the alien queen to life. I always say it took a big team of artists and audio animatronic people over here doing things that had never been done before, and it took Sigourney. And Sigourney was 50% of that equation, because when she looked at nothing and made you believe that alien queen was there, she already did half the job. But then we still had to do the other half of the job, you know, and I'm kind of intrigued by those challenges. I always like getting in over my head. It kind of forces you to step up and figure something out, you know, and I always feel like I'm best when I'm pressed into a corner, you know, when I've trapped myself.
Yes. Yes, I feel like that's the same. I tend to trap myself and then think, oh, how am I going to get out of this? You know, I've got to build my parachute on the way down. It's sort of the only way I know how to do it. In the writing process, I tend to have a lot of notes that I gather over a long period of time. And they tend to be, you know, an idea for scenes or characters or snippets of dialogue that I don't know how they'll fit all together. It's like making a quilt or like a collage art. I start to bits, and then once I have enough little pieces, then I start building from what feels like the beginning. And it's only after I have a large collection of things that feel, I don't know any other word, it's sort of sticky. Like they keep coming, I keep coming back to them, and often I don't know how they fit together.
But you have moments and scenes. I was going to ask you just as sort of one of these generic questions, like how has acting helped your directing? But I think what I'm seeing is in acting, you're in the moment and you have to create a moment. You don't know what's going to happen next. And it's informed by what's happened previously to your character, but you're creating a moment. It sounds to me like you apply that to your writing process.
I think that's true. And I also think, I mean, honestly, I think that the acting part of it as it applies to writing was also, I think I figured out how to try to be a good writer by memorizing good writing and trying to say, what I realized about good writing is it endlessly gives you ideas. Like when I'm memorizing Tennessee Williams, I mean, I've never played Tennessee Williams professionally, but you're like, oh, this scene could open in so many different ways. Like this is not, what he's giving you is not a prescription of how this should be said. What he's giving you is a rich palette to start to draw upon. So I felt like even also memorizing the rhythms of great writers was extremely helpful to me. I think it was George Carlin said he read Shakespeare out loud, but then you can sort of see it in his comedy, that he has that kind of the pacing and the thing. And I think that for me, that was the connection also between writing and acting. And then I think still rhythm is extremely important to me. I'll try not to sit at the monitor. I try to sit by the camera, but I also could close my eyes and just listen to the actors. I'll know if it's correct or not almost by the way it sounds more than anything else.
But my heels are on the ground. I'm no longer on tiptoes.
That's okay. Let me see.
I like to watch the actors in the moment if I can. I'm usually operating, so I'm usually feeling very attuned to what they're doing and letting that kind of drive my instinct with the camera. But if I'm not operating a shot, I tend to try to just watch them directly, not necessarily the image. I feel like I can feel them better.
I was so fascinated when you were generous enough to speak to me before, and you said, I've just constantly thought of this as when you were talking about when you have the actors in the motion capture suits and you're doing it that way, you said, whatever you're doing, make it directable. I do that because then I can figure out, I figured out how I'd shoot any scene. Like, where are we? Where are they moving? How does this work? Like, where would I put the camera if this is the scene? It sounds obvious, but it's the best advice because I think you can get kind of overwhelmed sometimes with all the possibilities. Especially
if you're a writer, you sort of know the girder work or the architecture of the scene and what you're trying to achieve at a kind of a meta-dramatic level. But that's not necessarily actable for the actor in the moment. I was going to ask you that as a director now, coming from an acting background, are you channeling the directors who did you the most good, or are you reacting against the ones who did you the least good in that moment?
I think I'm trying to channel the directors that did me the most good, but I also feel that directing is the place that I feel most myself, and I can only ever do it as myself. I've had moments where I've tried to imitate something I've seen, and it's just a disaster. I have to be myself, otherwise it's just the actors can smell it. Everyone on the crew is like, what are you pretending to be?
Yeah, so you came in with a monocle and a German accent,
yes,
and it didn't work out.
Exactly. I always remember there was on Lady Bird, there was sort of this question of they wanted a director picture, and they were like, "Do you have any pictures of you pointing?" Because it looked sort of like directorial. And then I thought, oh gosh, should I point more? Do I point enough? And then that's one of the wonderful things about acting is you really get to see how different people do it. But then it also makes you realize all of these people, what they have in common is they're utterly themselves. They are only doing it out of their own beautiful weirdness, and they can't do it any other way.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Ken. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
I can.
Talk about Ryan Gosling. What was that creative relationship like? Did he get it on the page what he needed to do? Because he went all the way in. I mean, he didn't hold him. Yeah. He was incredibly brave in that character.
Noah and I wrote it for Ryan, and we were just certain it should be him. It was almost like we wrote it, like I'd never met him, I didn't know him, but I loved him as an actor, and I thought he was always very funny, but he was funny from a place of total sincerity, and I thought that's exactly what this needs.
There's no irony in Ken. He's just 100%. What he's feeling is what he's saying, what he's doing, and there's a silliness to the character, but he couldn't play silly. He had to just play earnest.
I kept thinking of John Barrymore because John Barrymore is so funny, but he's so serious. And like John Barrymore in 20th Century or in Grand Hotel, and that kind of his wild-eyed everything, you know, that was one idea. And then Gene Wilder is a serious comedian in a way. There's an intensity. Right. And I thought he kind of possessed that thing. And so we gave him the script, and we eventually got on a phone call together, and he understood it immediately. And it took months of figuring out schedules and this and that, but he understood it so deeply, so fast. And I remember when he came to rehearsals, and I saw him and Margot do it together, and I had a moment where I looked at the two of them acting together, and I thought, oh, I want to watch this movie. And it's just, I felt like a kid, like, I want this movie.
If you can't cry at your own movie, how do you expect millions of people to cry in that moment? You know, I think you have to be a movie fan first and foremost when you're looking at your own stuff, because if you get too intellectual and it's too much about the message or the between the lines or whatever, you're going to come up with something that may be quite artistic, but it won't be heartfelt. And what I think the ultimate triumph of Barbie is how heartfelt it is and how the audience reacts emotionally to these characters.
In a way, you always go back to experiences you had or I do as a kid watching movies and being totally swept away. And it really almost the quality of watching movies that I had as a kid, the closest I can think of it is the intensity of emotion in dreams. Like this, it just totally carries you. And I think in some ways I'm always trying to give that feeling that I had as a kid watching movies, to give it back, because I think that it's just like utter magic can unfold in front of you, and television as well is incredible. But I also think for me, movies, there's something about when they end and the credits roll and the first thought you have is, I want to go back.
It took me a long time to unpack Barbie, I have to say. I mean, I got it at first value, first viewing. Yeah. I saw so much more in it, after that. And I have so many random questions. Like, I want to know, obviously, Gloria's monologue, her speech, did that come out of your notes? Was that a starting point? Or was that something where you read the first draft that said, we need to say this, and it dropped in later?
It came out of writing ourselves into a corner. I mean, we got to the point where, this all sounds so absurd to say now, but we said, okay, well, I suppose they're all brainwashed. All the Barbies have been brainwashed. And then we were like, well, how do you break people out of being what is the thing that makes them know that? And then we were talking about grounding people into reality or articulating things that are contradictory that then allow them to see it. And that's what it came out of. And then I was like, what if she explained this impossibility? I kind of sat down and wrote this quickly, and then Noah read it, and he was like, well, that's great. No, you put that in. And then once America, who I had always envisioned playing this part, which is amazing, we got all these people, but America, she then made the speech her own, and she brought her own things, and we actually, I adjusted it based on notes that she had written, and she added a line, and we changed it because I wanted it to be, tailored for her. But that really came out of this impossibility of okay, well, now what happens? And I think the whole thing, I want it to be able to be experienced as a sort of confection, and then I also wanted it to be able to be like, oh wait, what's this hat trick that's happening right now?
But it's right there in front of God and everybody. There must have been screenings where people actually applauded at the end of that.
She did the speech, and that was the first time in testing, and there was a spontaneous applause.
How long is the scene? Like a minute, right? Ish?
A minute or something, a couple minutes, yeah.
You managed to do in a minute, basically sum up, thousands of years of the female dilemma in 1 minute. I don't think it's ever been done as succinctly and hit the mark so perfectly.
Never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line.
The opportunity, the terror and the opportunity of Barbie, which is, Barbie it's an object, it's a doll. She doesn't have a character or a story, because the whole point is that you sort of project onto her.
Right.
But in the projecting onto her, we're also projecting all of these contradictions we've held for so long. It was almost because it was superficial, it like literally superficial, literally plastic, literally superficial, it allowed it to be deeper because of that. It was almost like a way to explore something, because I think the most ordinary objects or the most ordinary things can be something that contains, it can be a real prism for everything. And I'm a big believer in finding holiness where holiness isn't obvious, or finding sacredness where sacredness isn't obvious. And I think that sort of like, if we can find a way to investigate this in a playful, fun, high wire act kind of way, but also investigate it, that will be the sort of thing to do. And so that's how we came at everything.
It's really a consummate triumph, I think, of cinema, because you give people permission to step outside themselves. Science fiction does that, fantasy does that, but you gave people permission to look at the how comedic and silly and dumb the entire human delusion really is. And I always feel like if you can just break through that delusion that we kind of all share and that's self-propagating through time. I love the fact, for me, it was reminiscent of the bright colors and the brightly lit set pieces. It was reminiscent of the early 60s kind of romantic and gender role comedies, but it was flipped. Right. It was flipped around, because the men were the arm pieces, the men were secondary, the men were, and the women were driving things, and the women were in all of the key roles, and the men were just the dumb boyfriend. And then that soap bubble pops because it never existed.
Those soundstage musicals, those like 50s, 60s, that was all in there. That was the aesthetic that I wanted, because it gave me permission to flip it.
And you had the courage to say, this has to be big. It has to be writ large. If it's not writ large, it's going to get too sort of intimate and intellectual. But you put it, and it almost had a Bollywood sensibility in the sense that people just burst into song apropos of nothing and turned into a big musical set piece. And how fun is that, right?
I wanted it to be gleefully anarchic, but to kind of have that anarchy, I felt like I had to control it extremely carefully. So it's like, if you want to get to a place where there's a musical number that then becomes a dream ballet, that then becomes them riding imaginary horses, you have to be walking a pretty narrow tightrope so that it seems like it's just effervescent and overflowing, but actually kind of keeping it on these tracks. You know, I was thinking a lot about also how also comedies of, you know, some of my favorites of, like, you know, Preston Sturges or Ernst Lubitsch or Howard Hawks, you know, it's fast, it's funny, it's coming at you, and there's a lot of ideas. And I thought if you can wrap this correctly, people love ideas. They actually love them.
And the stylized storytelling, you know, I mean, when there are so many ways you could have got her from Barbie land to the real world, but you chose this kind of series of proscenium set pieces that are almost sort of late 1800s theater, you know, with like cardboard waves. And, you know, there was a little bit of almost a Wes Anderson vibe there, that it's very kind of structured kind of image creation. But somebody else might have done it with a magic wand wave or stepping through a mirror or some, you know, there are so many ways to do it. But you were playing by your own rules throughout that movie in a way that I think it's pretty spectacular, I have to say.
I think one of the things when you go way out on a limb with anything that you're doing, what's wonderful when an audience finds it, and that is, luckily, it enables you to make the next one, but it also feels, to me, almost comforting to know that whatever is your internal world that you're interested in, that other people answer that. And that feels, then you feel like, oh goodness, maybe we all have maybe everybody is strange in some way. We'd make it that way, and that people would accept it. And I think of all of your films and think about the worlds you created and the things you've created, and they're so specific to you, and yet I find them in Sacramento, California, and I think, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
What? And then that's an extraordinary thing.
Talk to me about the reaction, your personal journey as the film was accepted, as it was successful, as it was torn apart and backlashed and extolled the virtues. What was that journey like for you?
It came out on July 21st, and then I spent all of August being carpool mom. So I was taking my kid to camp every day, and other kids. And
you have two boys, right? You have two boys?
I have two boys and a stepson, so I have my own wonderful Mojo Dojo Casa house. It's marvelous. But so in a way I was in a bubble. It's still hitting me. But I think the thing that I keep the thing that makes me most sort of excited is I hope I get to make a lot of movies, and I hope I make, you know, different movies, bigger movies, smaller movies, but it's the feeling that I'll be able to have the access to the size of the canvas I need.
When you need the size, people will trust you with it because you use that palette correctly to make
at least one more time. And then but it is that feeling of like, okay, what do they say, the shark grows to fit the size of the tank, you know, you
right.
But what it feels like to me is there's a certain amount of internal creative freedom that I feel like it unlocks. And I don't know how everything will go, obviously, in the future, but I think my response to it is just like, I can paint with more colors.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have been allowed to make Titanic if I hadn't had some successes on films in completely different genres, but that were all relatively large films for their time. You know, True Lies was a big film for its time. Terminator 2 was, you know, the highest costing film in its time. And success on those led to me getting the resources I needed to make Titanic. Now, that said, there was a moment on Titanic where we all thought we were doomed and it was going to be a big smoking crater, but it turned out to connect. So, so then I got trusted to make Avatar, which was also quite ambitious. So I agree with that. In principle, you do earn the right to at least, be heard. You've got to come in with something. Every time you got to come in with something good and compelling, but at least you'll be heard.
I always tell my, you know, because I collect stories, obviously, of directors, of you, of other directors.
I deny everything.
Well, but I like look at these stories. They're like, oh, well, they stuck to their guns and they said this. And I think I said to my producer, David Heyman, I was like, you should start circulating more stories about directors who compromise and it works out. Because
Right.
I was like, you need to start having like these kind of like maybe apocryphal stories of a director who didn't want to do something, then did it, because I was like, the only stories I hear are of directors who say, no, we're going to do it this way.
Well, sometimes the compromise leads to something that actually works.
So he told me about some compromises, and I was like, okay, then you need to get those stories out.
Yeah, exactly. Like when we were making True Lies, we had this huge elaborate set piece that was going to take place up in these snowy mountains, and there was skiing and a crashed helicopter, and he winds up skiing a helicopter on its skids down the mountain. Big James Bond sequence. We got up there, we shot one night in the mountains, and I had this horrific image that we were going to be up there for 3 weeks, and we were already behind the schedule. And I knew that it was going to compromise our release date. And at that point, like I knew we wouldn't hit our release date if we stayed there. So I walked in, I got the whole crew together in the hotel lobby the next morning. I said, we're going to finish the scene tonight. Here's what's out. The helicopter's out, this is out, that's out, that's out. He shoots 2 guys, jumps in the van, they drive away. That's it. And that's actually what's in the movie, believe it or not. And we finished it in one night.
That's a good compromise story. Those moments are the things that sometimes you discover something new. I think I just heard the thing of in Rocky when they're in the ice rink, the 2 of them and no one else is there. That's because they didn't have enough money to have
Extra, like.
So then they had to rewrite it so he knew the guy who was cleaning the ice rink. And then it's this wonderful romantic scene, and it's sweet, and it's the 2 of them. And that was a compromise. So because it doesn't matter, actually, I do think it doesn't matter how well it's gone or anything like that. There's always a wall you'll hit that you have to figure it out.
I mean, I think the rule should be, if it's brilliant by mistake, take credit.
Yes, that's good. I very much appreciate this, and I can't wait to talk again. Every time you're the most interesting person to talk to about filmmaking. And
well, let's talk some more when the next opportunity arises. I mean, we both can obviously learn a lot from each other. So this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And I enjoyed going down the hall and continuing to cut.
No, all I have to do is a 180 in my chair, and I'm back to work.
No, that's like a good end for this TV show. And
Yes.